Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Super Soldier Talk. My name is James Rink, and yes, I was utilized as a super soldier in the secret space program, but today I'm just a host on this show, and we've got Jessica Jones. She's going to be filling that empty chair just any second now. Welcome to the show, Jessica.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
This has
thanks
been
for
fun.
volunteering. I know you had a really busy day today with your own show on the cryptid huntress YouTube channel, which I put a link into the description for audience members. I highly encourage you to go check out her channel, maybe even subscribe. So,
Thank
all right.
you.
And we also have an old favorite here on Super Soldier Talk. I mean, geez, it's probably maybe 20 times now, Jimmy, but probably, oops, what's going on? I got a glitch. Oh no, we're going to start all over again. What's going on, guys?
It's a glitch in the matrix.
I'm pausing it. I'm pausing so I can troubleshoot.
It's just a little glitch.
Okay, I figured the problem out.
No biggie.
I had a link open in another window, so I was sending it over to Jessica earlier in the chat. So problem solved. But all right, so enough of this distractions, we got to let me go ahead and read this bio here. So today or tonight, Jessica Jones will be joining me along with M.I.B. agent Jimmy Paine. So today we're actually going to be discussing a little bit about Henry Kissinger. So Jimmy worked with Henry Kissinger in the secret space program, and I also have a little thing as well that I wouldn't say I worked for. I guess I did work for him, more like he worked me as a SEX asset, but I don't know, we'll wait to the end of all that before I start sharing any of that. But so Henry Kissinger died on November 29th, 2023. So here we are. Not a month yet, about 3 weeks later. Okay, so Super Soldier Agent Jimmy Paine, aka Dallas, was an M.I.B. In the secret space program from 1959 to 1996. During this time, he was a shuttlecraft pilot for the Tall White Warriors at Area 51 and participated in time travel missions with the Montauk Boys at Camp Hero. He also recalls working for Weyland Corporation, where he encountered a xenomorph at LV-426, which the movie Aliens was based off of. He was stationed on Mars, Titan, the Moon, and on Mars, he has seen a broken statue of the giant face of a humanoid on a mission in 1974 alongside Duncan O'Finoian. He remembers seeing Tommyknockers in a cave on Mars, which are a muscular type of tall grays. On the moon of Titan, he was stationed in a massive underground facility or base. He was tasked with fighting a monster they called It. It looked like the Junior Montauk monster, a type of Bigfoot monster that would gain strength by attacking it. He was also on secret missions from Vandenberg Air Force Base, the Lunar Apollo 20 mission with William Rutledge, where they discovered an oriental-looking humanoid named EBE Mona Lisa. So Jimmy claims the Apollo 20 footage is real. Jimmy, tell me what, you were with the Predator too? What else did you have? You knew JFK, you met him in person, maybe played a role in his extermination, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Jimmy, why don't you unmute yourself? Come on in so we can hear you.
Can you hear me, James?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
I knew Lee Harvey Oswald because that was my first mission outside of Area 51. I worked with Lee Harvey Oswald.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. So where should we even begin? Maybe tell us a little bit of, is there anything else you'd like to add to that bio that maybe I might have missed?
No.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So let's go ahead and we'll start with today's featured presentation about Henry Kissinger. So maybe start off with I guess you did meet him, right, in person?
Yes, I knew Henry pretty well. I kind of want to start off on Henry's early life, so you have a better understanding of where he's coming from, and then I'm going to lead you into how I first met him, and then how I ended up in Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia. Now, Henry Kissinger was born in 1923, and he lived in southern Germany. The largest city that's closest to him is Nuremberg, but he's really from a little town outside of Nuremberg called Ford. And it's not spelled Ford, it's spelled Furd. It's probably within the city limits now of Nuremberg. But when Henry was born, World War One had just come to a close, and the first thing created after World War One was the League of Nations. Now, the League of Nations is created, and the same year the League of Nations were created, they also created Boy Scouts of America. Now, all the allies that fought in the Second World War, we're talking France and United States, started off when the veterans returned. The World War One veterans, excuse me, they formed the Boy Scouts, and the Boy Scouts formed in other nations around the world because we had embassies all over the world by 1941. Excuse me, by 1920, we had it was all over the world. Now, in 1923, Kissinger is born, and his father is a school teacher. And you have to remember, there's no TV, there is radio. So when he was growing up, he liked to play soccer. That was his most favorite sport. And the little town that he's from, Ford, there in that same town that he lived in, Adolf Hitler's personal photographer lived in that town. So every picture that you see of Adolf Hitler was taken by a little boy who lived in Ford when Henry was there. And also in this town was a physicist that was Henry's friend. Now, if you watch the movie Dr. Strangelove and How I Stopped Worrying, Love to Live the Bomb, and you'll see a man in a wheelchair with some purple glasses on, and he's the guy that wants to go into underground nuclear bunker. That's Dr. Strangelove. That was Henry's friend. A lot of people didn't know that, but I did. Okay, so let's get back. We're back at Henry. It's 1923, and the economy in Germany is.
So, Jimmy, I put this up here.
Yes, that's his friend, the one below.
So this is a fictional movie, though.
It is a fictional movie, but it's based off of a real physicist. The actor that played the physicist is one below, but Henry knew that. No, that's not him. That's another physicist. That's one from Montauk. I knew him.
John von Neumann.
Yeah, I knew John. Go back.
Go up.
back,
You may go up to the.
Let's just back out of that because I don't want to get
Okay.
too far in that.
Okay. I'll just. There you go.
So he what happens is he's born in 1923, and he stays in Germany till he's 15 years old. Now, you have to remember in 1929, United States is having the Great Depression, and you have the Dust Bowl going on. You have long lines where men are unemployed, going to a soup kitchen and everything. And the United States is just, the stock market is crashed. Well, in Germany, they're paying war reparations because when the League of Nations was created, they'd already broken a third of Germany off, and they made Poland. So Poland is Germany. It's just broken off after the war. See, the spoilers get to write the history. So Germany, like I said, is broken in half. Actually, it was broken during World War One. It was just during World War Two that things all went to a head. But anyhow, Henry leaves Germany with his family, and he goes to London, and he stays in London for about a year or so. And I guess things didn't work out, so they went ahead and migrated to the United States. And he came in at Ellis Island, and he ended up settling in Massachusetts. And when Henry was 15 years old, he went to work for a company that made shaving brushes. Back then they had to put shaving foam on their face to shave. So he made the brushes that you dip into the little bowl. And he did that during the day. And then at night, he went to George Washington High School, and he graduated a couple of years later. And when he graduated, he ended up about during that time, he goes back and forth to college. But the war breaks out, and World War II breaks out, and he ends up going back to Germany with the army. And when they ended up in Germany, they couldn't read a lot of the paperwork. So Henry knew how to read German, and he knew how also to read, the markers on the road. A lot of times they would change the markers around to give misinformation as far as directions to these cities. So because Henry knew how to read German, they went ahead and promoted him to intelligence. So Henry was an intelligence officer once he got back into Germany during the Second World War. And he went back down towards Nuremberg. Now, when the war came to a close, James, there was a lot of the rockets, the V rockets, and a lot of the inventions that the Germans had made. So that was the era that he got into as far as the German secret weapons of the Second World War. Now, I'm going to stop here he comes back and he joins the Army Air National Guard, and he stays in it till at least 1959 that I know of. Now, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to start off on how I got involved with all the UFO stuff. In or around when I was about 6 years old, in 1961, I believe, is when I first had my encounter. And I was taken on board an aircraft, examined, and was let out, you know. And then I had another encounter with the same, well, not the same group of aliens, but a different group. Those aliens are the ones that went on, and they had actually, after they got me out, after my second encounter, 4 months after my second encounter, though that same group of aliens abducted Betty and Barney Hill. Betty and Barney Hill were abducted 4 months after my second encounter.
So something that not many people know is that they actually got STDs from their encounters.
Well, now, when I met Phil Snyder's father, Oscar Snyder used to be on the Eldridge. He was one of the designers of the Philadelphia experiment. And Oscar was in a German SS uniform when I first met him. Now, Barney Hill talks about an SS officer when he was on board the Flying Saucer. Well, that was Oscar Snyder, Phil Snyder's father. Phil Snyder was my best friend. He was a geologist that got murdered. But anyhow, I want to get back to me again. I went right about 1961. The military came to my house. I had an Ewok that I used to be friends with. There's actually like about a 7-minute clip of him on Star Wars. So a lot of people don't know that, but one of those Ewoks is really real, you know. The rest of them are fake, but we have a real Ewok. There's about a 7-minute clip of Mo. He's on a little motorcycle. He looks like a little bear. And he's set up behind a green screen, and he's just riding this little scooter. So, but anyway, someone turned me in, and the military had to come capture Mo. But what happened was, when I was playing with Mo, there was a rose bush in the backyard, and I scratched myself, my arm, well, my shoulder, on that thorn next to the rose bush. And when the men in black came to my house, they saw that I had a scratch on my arm, top of my arm, by my shoulder. And they said, "Well, how did you get that scratch? Did Mo scratch you?" And I said, "No." And so the intelligence officer, one of the men in black, looked up at the other intelligence officer with a worried look. He didn't say anything else. So my parents said, "Go back outside and play now." So I went outside, and they talked to my parents for a while. And then they left. And later at night, just before midnight, they came back to the house with a battering ram, and they knocked in the front door, knocked it completely off the hinge, came in there, frightened my parents half to death, and they went into my bedroom. I was in my underwear, I was only 6 years old, and I was asleep. And they picked me up out of the bed, and they took me and put me on an airplane and flew me directly to Nellis Air Force Base. And when I got to Nellis Air Force Base, they put me in an isolation chamber, like where they study viruses and such. And the only way you could go into this room, you got into a rubber suit, and it had an air hose connected to it, and they fully encapsulated. And they would come in and examine me, and then they would back out of the room, get out of the suits, and close the vault. So it was basically an airtight room. And they watched me for about 6 or 7 days. And eventually a little scratch healed up. Because, when you're young, it doesn't take long to get a scar to come up. And this tall woman came in with dark glasses on, and she gave me a little teddy bear. And actually, that wasn't a human woman. That was a tall white female. They looked just human. And so that was the first time I ever met a tall white warrior, was Rachel. She was my dead mother. And so anyhow, they let me go once my father and mother had to talk to they had a talk to Eisenhower. And Eisenhower said, look, we really are having some trouble with these extraterrestrials. And they seem like your son. And we really need him to get to know him. So it was agreed upon that more by my father than me, because I was too young to make a decision. It was agreed upon that the Air Force would take me, and I would spend every summer out of Area 51. I would spend all my holidays out of Area 51. And so that's how I got to knowing the tall white warriors. Now, when I was at Area 51, when I was 6 years old, Vietnam had just started off, and and General Westmoreland was in charge of the armed forces in Vietnam. He's Army. Well, Nellis Air Force Base, nobody had heard of General Westmoreland, because they're Air Force and he's Army. But all they knew was that when the bodies, when the Air Force would fly back from Vietnam, they would unload the dead bodies off of the planes. And I can remember that just like yesterday. The young men that were in the body bags being unloaded, and it was real scary, because every time that plane landed, you had a lot of military families that lived at Nellis Air Force Base, and a lot of those young men also flew jets, and they got their training out there at Area 51. So they, like I said, nobody knew what was going on, because the Army was in charge. So the Air Force, these women that lived out at Area 51, well, Nellis Air Force Base, what they did was they got to talking to the First Lady of South Vietnam. And nobody was searching for these MIAs. the president of South Vietnam, he is engaged full time with General Westmoreland. So the first lady of South Vietnam, she gets to talking to these women out at Nellis Air Force Base, and so they figure out a plan where I'm going to go with one of the women. We're going to go over to the palace in South Vietnam and meet with the president's wife over there. So we get over there and they hand me a coloring book. Now this coloring book has got pictures in it, and the pictures have numbers in them. And they also give me a box of crayons, and the crayons are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what you do, you have to take the number crayon and match it with the number in the picture. In other words, say grass is 1. You use crayon 1, which is green. You would, color the grass. And then say crayon 2 is blue. That's the sky. So you would color the sky blue. And then if there was a flower in there, that's number 3, yellow.
I think we follow you. So you have the coloring.
So what it is it's an enigma. It's a coded message. Okay. So they get this coded message from her, and I bring the coloring book back, and we go to Lyndon Johnson's the White House, and Lyndon Johnson gets a coloring book. He goes to the safe. He opens the safe up. There's a plastic card. He breaks it, and he pulls out a sheet of paper. And basically, it tells them the numbers. It tells them a coded message. So she's sending coded messages back to Lyndon Johnson. Now, Lyndon Johnson didn't really trust General Westmoreland, see, because now we're starting to get communications going on the backside of what's really going on in Vietnam. And I do this for about 1.5 years. Well, when you're getting around about 7.5, 8 years old, you're growing out of your coloring books. So it was devised for another child to come in after me. And so I go back to Area 51, and I stay there, mingling with extraterrestrials. And there are different groups of extraterrestrials at Area 51. And I got kind of a reputation is one extraterrestrial group would send a message to another extraterrestrial group, and they would use me as a courier. So I'm carrying messages back and forth as a young child between different species of different aliens. This goes on till I'm about 9 years old. And at 9 years old, they bring me back to Vietnam. And I go down into Vietnam, and what has happened, the first lady of Vietnam, they want to start a Boy Scouts unit up. Okay. They're trying to be as an American as they can. So the first lady of South Vietnam, she gets with the agricultural minister, and they're going to form Boy Scouts of Vietnam. Can you go ahead and pull that picture up, James? The other one we had earlier tonight. split your screen or get it up.
Yeah, we also have a lot of questions, and maybe we should. I want to pause you a little bit, if you don't mind. Let's let Jessica. Do you have any questions, Jessica, or comments you want to add? Go ahead and mute yourself.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm still curious about that Ewok, Jimmy. Okay. I'm the cryptid huntress over here, so I think that's really cool. But no, I don't have any questions per se so far. But I'm just really interested in your Ewok friend. I wish I had one.
We're going to get into some more alien stuff while I'm in Vietnam.
Awesome.
Because that's where you said you met the Predator.
Well, no, let's not.
Okay,
Let me pick
Go
up.
ahead. I'll stop.
Let me pick up where I left off. Okay, the first lady of Vietnam has gotten with the Minister of Agriculture, and they're going to start up Boy Scouts of Vietnam. Now, the Boy Scouts of Vietnam, she zigzags all through South Vietnam, which is 1,000 miles of Vietnam is about 1,000 miles long, and she recruits over 3,100 Boy Scouts. So here we have a paramilitary group of very young men who are they're not old enough to join the military. You have to be 18 to join the South Vietnamese military. So these kids range in age from 9 years old up to 17 years old. Okay? And there's 3,100. There's also some Girl Scouts of Vietnam. I don't know much about them. Most of them become secretaries or nurses. All right. But now, not only do they create Boy Scouts of Vietnam, they also create a Civil Air Patrol. Now, the Civil Air Patrol is made up of mostly young people, and if you join the Civil Air Patrol, James, you'll get I think after about a month, they might give you 1 hour of flying time in a flight simulator. I believe that's how it went in Vietnam. So you're able to take these real young boys, and if they're a Boy Scout and they're also a member of the Civil Air Patrol, they can also get flight lessons, how to fly a helicopter or a jet in a simulator. Now, the Boy Scouts of Vietnam, I joined it. Now, who I reported to was Clark Air Force Base. That's in the Philippines. And in the Philippines, you have expatriates that live in the Philippines. Well, they also have Boy Scouts in the Philippines. So my base was back in Clark Air Force Base. That's who ran this program. Now, the guy there in the center, the tall white scout you see in the center, he's my replacement. And the guy to the right is my friend Kim. He's about 15 years old in that film. He had just came back from Saigon. He had been in a whorehouse, living it up. And in fact, I loaned him my sunglasses. I never got my sunglasses back, in fact. But he was my best friend in Vietnam. He lived closer to Khe Sanh, is where he lived outside of Khe Sanh. And but anyhow, what happened was when I first met Kim, me and him, we ran together. And one of the first things they do with the younger boys is that they'll put a 10-pound sack of flour on your back, like you have a little backpack, and you carry this 10-pound sack of flour from one village to the next village. And what they're doing, they want to get you used to carrying a load behind you. And then the older boys, they will go out. The older you got, the deeper you go into the jungle. Okay, like a guy that's 17 years old, he'll go way up in the jungle. But the little 9-year-old kids, they may go from one village to the next village. They stay on paths, and they gradually work you into this going deeper and deeper into the jungle. But what it was, when you go into the jungle, there'd be opium fields out there. They had illegal opium growing out there, and they would put drugs in the back of the sacks, and you put it in your backpack, and you would carry these drugs back on into Vietnam there, if you went over into Laos or Cambodia. So basically, what we're doing, we're training smugglers is basically what we were, but we're also more or less I'm a diplomatic courier. I'm also expected to carry sensitive information. So this goes on, and I start going back from the palace of South Vietnam, and I go up into Laos, to the royal family in Laos. And from Laos, I go to Lima 85. If you ever watched the movie Apocalypse Now, that's where I was at. In fact, Marlon Brando, I had to go and talk to Marlon Brando to give him an idea of how it was like when that movie was being filmed. But that is how.
Jimmy, hold on. We have some
Go ahead.
questions here.
Yeah.
Was this picture here? Was this pre or post Vietnam? I think you said early part of the war, right?
Yes.
Like 54,
yes.
1954, 1955.
James, 1954 is when the
French left.
The French left.
Yeah.
Okay. This program ran for a good number of years. I know it ran at least from and it probably could have ran more than that. I first became aware of it in 1965, and it went on up until the end of the war. So I don't know how long it really ran. I became aware of it in around 64. 1964 is when I first became aware of it.
So what year was this picture taken?
James, I can't really tell you because there's different pictures in there.
Okay.
But I can tell you the boy in the center came from Clark Air Force Base.
Yeah, in the Philippines, which is
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another question. So they were bringing, I guess, more like a comment. So they're bringing in drugs to get money, or do they want to get the population hooked on dope?
They needed money for the war effort.
And when you say they, who are you referring to?
Well, the South Vietnamese government. Now, either you get the drugs, or the enemy gets the drugs, and then they take the drugs and pay the Chinese for weapons. So it's a matter of getting to the crops before the North Vietnamese do, because the Chinese will end up with it, and that's how they pay for the weapons, illegal weapons.
All right, I'm following you.
Now, let me get back. Let me say this. When I was Now I'm going to tell you what Henry had to do with all this. When I would go up into Cambodia, one day I got caught, and so I called up Henry, and Henry got me released. And Henry Kissinger knew I was carrying illegal drugs. So I think this was closer to the Vietnamese Cambodian border. But he knew I had been arrested for carrying drugs. Okay. Now he said, "Look, we're going to put you on a different route." I said, "Fine." So I went
but you got arrested. How did you get out of all that?
He made a few telephone calls, and the local village in that area knew him, and they let me go. He had that much influence.
And when you say he as in who?
Henry Kissinger.
Okay, thank you.
Henry Kissinger has so much influence in Cambodia, they let me go.
But this is so strange. I mean, he just grew up. Was he rich when in Germany, and suddenly now he's this influential? I mean, how did he?
James, I only met him when I was 6 years old. That was closer to 19. I first went to Area 51 around 1961, 62, 61, I believe, or early 62. Now, Kissinger, Kissinger knew Eisenhower, President Eisenhower. Okay, you have to remember he's a former intelligence officer, so Eisenhower believed in him.
But he would have only been what, 30 years old?
James
Eisenhower.
James, you have to research that yourself. I can't. I don't want to get tied down.
Understood. We'll
okay.
Proceed.
Yeah. All right. Let me get back to my story before I get bogged down here. So I get released. He says, "Look, we got a different trail we want you to use." So there was about 24 Viet Cong trails. And I'd already knew most of them by that time. I didn't know all of them, but I knew most of them going into the jungle. And so they put me on one I had never been on before. And I got on it, and I was going down that trail. This is maybe about 8 months to 9 months later from the time that I was arrested. And I'm going down this other trail, and I find a booby trap, which was a pit with stakes in it. If I fell in it, it would have killed me. So I knew that there had to be enemy somewhere close by. So I walked around the pit and went on for about another mile, and then I found another booby trap, which was some spikes, basically a big pile of mud, a mud ball with spikes out of it on a vine. This thing would swing out from a tree and stick spikes in you. All right. Go another mile, and then I found a grenade with a tripwire to it on the trail. So I knew that trail had enemy on it. And I ended up having, when you're young, they give you a knife, like when you're 9 years old, but when you get about 14, 15, they give you a pistol. Well, I was already 15 by that time, and I didn't want to use my pistol because I knew that if I fired it, somebody would hear. but ended up killing 3 Cambodians. They were waiting there for me. One was asleep, laid up against a tree. I killed him. Went up, like I say, every mile I would end up find another enemy combatant. But when I got up to about my 5th mile, a man stepped out behind a tree, and he had a machete, and ended up having to shoot him. And when I did, he fell next to a log, next to a creek. And he was hung up. So by that point, I went ahead and proceeded on down the trail. I come to a village, and one of the elders came out, and they was very surprised. They had a shock on their face, and they didn't. In other words, they weren't expecting me to come through. And but what had happened? They ended up calling one of the police in the village, and they were going to arrest me. And I took my when I was talking to the interpreter, the body of the man that I killed came unhung from the branch upstream, and he floated downstream, and his body floated past us. So they knew I had killed him, and they were going to arrest me. And I took my arm and I brought it up, and I tapped on my watch, and I said, if I'm not at a certain point within an hour from now, a B-52 is going to come over and they're going to bomb your village. In other words, I made a threat to the policeman. And so what they ended up doing, they fined me for littering. They didn't fine me for killing the guy. They said, well, we fine you for littering, but we need to get some money from you. And so I said, how much? What's the ransom? I had to pay them something, And I had already took my backpack and stashed it back on the trail because I didn't want to get caught, with the drugs. And ended up calling back Kissinger. And there was another guy, another scout that was in the area, and he came on in, and we paid a small ransom. I forgot how much it was. And then we left. I went back up the river to try to find the opium, but I never could find it. I got turned around in the jungle. That was the only time I ever lost anything in the war, was that one little pack.
Did they help hold you accountable for losing that? Like they thought maybe you were?
No. When I got back out of the field, they were very surprised. They said, we were curious of what was happening down on that trail, so we sent you. And I said, what? And they said, yeah, we have lost 4 other guys on that same trail. In other words, 4 other scouts had went down that trail. None of them survived. I would have been number 5. And so what had happened was they more than likely either those scouts fell in, they were either killed by the booby traps, or either they were arrested and sent into prison, or or murdered, but none of those other scouts came back. I was the only one that ever did. So it was decided.
So why do you think that you were able to survive while the others didn't?
Well, the guy, if you see the guy on the far right there, it's got the sunglasses on, that's Kim. Now, Kim, when I first started working with Kim when when I was 9 years old, we grew up together, and so Kim was who taught me about all the booby traps. Okay, Kim taught me a lot. Um, I'm going to tell you a slight interesting story about Kim, and then I'm going to get back on the Kissinger thing here. When I was probably about 10 years old, I went up towards Quezon. Right outside of Quezon is where Kim lived. And Kim said, "Hey, man, I found something in the jungle. I want you to look at it." I said, "Okay." So I went out in the jungle with Kim, and lo and behold, I stepped onto the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Now that thing is as big as the interstate highway. It was hid underneath the trees. And there's a tank that was on the side of the trail. And so me and Kim got to talk, and he said, if I flunk out of aviation school, maybe I can get into tank school. So we said, we came up with the idea that says, yeah, we need to do a little training on how to drive a tank. So we left. When we went back up into Quezon, there were, always building materials around. So we got a few blocks of wood, some duct tape, and a pillow. And we went back a day or two later, and we crawled into the tank, and Kim couldn't reach the pedals. So we took blocks of wood and taped it on to the pedals, and we took the pillow and put it at on the seat, because Kim was having problems trying to see out. We were that young, okay. And when we got into the tank, we had a box of Cracker Jacks. Now, the purpose of the Cracker Jacks is this: when the Boy Scouts of Vietnam would meet, they would fly in crates of Cracker Jacks, because I told you there's over 3,000 these Boy Scouts. So we were ordering Cracker Jacks by the pallet load. But in every box of Cracker Jacks, you get a prize back then. And one of the prizes were compasses. Okay, so that was what everybody wanted, was a compass, a little 1.25 inch compass, 1.5 inch compass. And then there was another prize in there. There's whistles. Okay, some of the younger boys use whistles. Anyhow, when we got in this tank, we had some Cracker Jacks, and we opened it up and we ate Cracker Jacks, and Kim got to driving. And then we would take turns. Kim would drive a while, I would drive a while. And back then, I dressed like a Vietnamese would dress. And I didn't put on bug spray. I always put mud on my skin because that was natural. I didn't want anyone or anything to smell me. There's tigers out in those jungles, James.
Were you Dutch at this point? Your name was Dutch?
John Ramble. Later, that would be John Rambo when the movie was made.
Oh, okay.
But
and how old are you at this point?
I'm 10 years old. I was using the name John Ramble. Sue Ford, when Sue Ford dated, Sue Ford is Kissinger's secretary. When Sue Ford dated actor Sylvester Stallone, they just changed it to John Rambo and made the movie. But getting back to my story about Kim, since I had mud on body, I could raise my hand up. I could never ride on top of the tank, but I would open the hatch up and view, look ahead for Kim. But when I saw another tank coming, I would just duck down and raise my hand up and wave at them, and they'd wave back at me. But we probably drove that tank good 25 miles before it ran out of fuel, and we ditched it. Well, what happened was this tank is going to come back up later, because when we got out of the tank, we left the Cracker Jack box in the floor, and plus we had bubble gum wrappers everywhere. We took our gum and stuck it up all over the place. And the Vietnamese, when they found out that they had a tank that had been disturbed, had been moved. See, the Ho Chi Minh Trail, nobody's supposed to know about that. And what bothered them was there was English writing on a Cracker Jack box. So they knew that this box of Cracker Jacks came from America. But what they couldn't figure out was the pillow and the blocks of wood on the foot controls. And so this thing about this tank is going to come up later. I'm going to put it to the side, and I'm going to tell you the ending story of that tank as we move on towards the rest of the story. All right. So I get back, like I said, from surviving this ambush, and we know the trail's compromised. So I ended up going back up to Laos, where the royal family is up in Laos, and I go from there and back and forth to Lima 85, which is an air base on a mountain about 15 miles from the North Vietnam border, and probably about another 30 or so miles from Hanoi. So that's where I was mostly stationed at. But as I was going back and forth during this time, I decided to go back down to De Lat, South Vietnam. And what happened was Howard Hunt, who is CIA, he used to live about 8 or 9 miles from my home where I grew up at here in the States. And Howard Hunt, they had found out about a real large drug field just outside of De Lat, South Vietnam. So what happened was they were going to give me 6% of whatever they could gross off of that field. At this time, I'm 11 years old, so that's a lot of money, 6% of a dope field, So I go back down to De Lat, South Vietnam. This was like, 1967. Now in De Lat, South Vietnam, when I was there, I think we went about 6 miles outside of town, and there was a field there. And when we were out there, me and the other intelligence officer, that intelligence officer had to be about 27 years old at the time, and I'm 11 years old. We walked into an opium field, and we had to step it off because you have to measure it to try to figure out how many acres it is. And when I was out in that very remote part of Vietnam, this GI comes running out of a jungle, he probably was about 19 years old, and he is fleeing for his life. And all of a sudden, there's gunfire from the wooded area, and he is shot through the torso. And when he is shot, he throws the impact of the bullet when he hits him in his back. He throws his rifle up in the air, and it lands down beside me, and he falls. And I got down. I put my hands on him, to try to stop the bleeding. And all of a sudden, the gunfire is shooting at both me and him. And I look up, and there's 5 Vietnamese. They're standing just outside of the wooded area into the field. There's 5 of them. And the M16 is right beside both of us. So I pick it up, and he didn't have a scope on it. It's just iron sights. So I'm a good football field and maybe a half away. A good football field and half away. I don't have a scope. And I went ahead and opened fire. And 4 of them went down, and the 5th one was standing, and then I seen another one, a 6th one, come out. So I shot, and that was all that I had left in the magazine, what was inside, what was in the M16. All right. And so they retreated back into the woods. I have 4 on the ground, and then 2 that retreated back into the woods. Now, the intelligence officer who was with me, of course, he was on the other side of the field. He had an old World War II radio that nobody was on. It was a surplus radio. So he called back in daylight, and he got another guy who ended up getting hold of the military. I don't know who the contact was. And then they flew some helicopters out, and soldiers got out, and they charged up into the wooded area. And also the medics got out of a second helicopter. They came over by me. And by that time, both my hands are full because this guy's got more than one wound on him. The bullet went in one side and came out the other side. So I'm holding my hands on both sides of him, trying to keep him from bleeding to death, James. So after about a few minutes, they get them back onto the helicopter, and they fly them back to the operating table. And so the soldiers come back out of the woods, and they're motioning for me to come over towards them. And so I walked over, to where they were at, and they walked me into the woods just a little bit. So the area is secure now, and there's 2 other guys in those woods, and the first guy I walked up on was the one that I shot, and he is bled out. He is dead. So the 5th one was dead there. He was just inside the woods. And then we walked a little ways more, and there's a 6th one, and he's dead. But what had happened, I killed 6. Well, there's 6 bodies. So by this time, they said, well, y'all need to go back to daylight. We're going to talk to y'all. So we went ahead. We hitched a ride back. We got back down daylight, and the military. I was supposed to go to there was a command post there in daylight, and I ended up going there the very next day. And when I walked in there, there's a colonel, and then there's another Vietnamese. He's in plain clothes. And then there's another officer, another military officer in there. And I had to tell him, what happened. And he looked at me, and he knows I'm underage, and he can't figure out what I'm doing in Vietnam, And I said, well, I'm an exchange student. Came out of Laos, and we just come down to Vietnam. We didn't know we thought it was safe, Of course, he knew we were lying. And he said, who taught you how to fight like that? And I couldn't say anything back because, I'm not supposed to get out any information. Well, the plainclothes guy, he was the national police. Now, the national police is equivalent to our FBI. And the national police, he's got an envelope, and he opens it up, and he puts the shells out onto the table where the colonel's at. And there's 5 shells, but yet there's 6 people dead. And what had happened was I shot the first 4, and then when I was on my last shell, I hit the guy, the last guy that was standing next to the woods there. The shell went through him, hit the other guy. So 1 shell went through the bodies of 2 of these Vietnamese. So what made things unusual was in Daylat, South Vietnam, they're building a nuclear power plant. Now, I had been in that nuclear power plant the day before because I need to know about propulsion systems. And at 11 years old, that was like, that was a good educational experience. So what had happened was the Vietnamese had spies in Daylat, South Vietnam. They see a little boy, a little white Caucasian boy about 11 years old going in and out of the nuclear power plant. Then they see this boy again out in the field next to opium, next to the opium. Well, it wasn't ordinary Vietnamese that I killed. Those were regular North Vietnamese commandos. Those were the equivalent of their Marines. These are North Vietnamese Marines. And there's a little guy, 11 years old, that's done killed 6 of them. So the Vietnamese are not too happy about that because some of them got away. Okay, so I go back down, to Daylat, and anyway, the guy that I was with said, "We got to go home. We've got orders to go home." I said, "Fine." So we get back on the plane. The national police officer, the one that was in that room, followed us to Hong Kong. After Hong Kong, they stopped. So we went ahead and flew back into the States. So as soon as I got touched down in the States, I'm ordered to go directly to Senator Robert Byrd's office in West Virginia. I said, damn, I didn't know what the hell's going on, So ended up going back to his office, and he said, "Man," he said, "you need, you killed the NVA, and they were near that nuclear power plant, and we're short over there, and we need you to go to Vietnam." And I didn't want to go. And so what happened was, Kathy O'Brien, she's about a year and a half earlier than me, but I like Kathy. She's the one that wrote Transformation of America.
And did it like Robert Byrd, Abuser?
Yeah, yeah. But he said, well, if you don't go, I'm going to send Kathy O'Brien. Well, I knew Kathy, she could sleep around in Washington, D.C., but she got back down into the whorehouses in South Vietnam. Somebody kidnapped her. I said, okay, well, I'll go back, to Vietnam. So I go back to Vietnam. I get back down daylight, and sure enough, that colonel, the one that interviewed me, I'm having to go back to him. I said, damn, I done got myself in a war now. I'm 11 years old, but I'm still too young, to do regular fighting. Well, just so happened, he said, well, we've been having some reports of UFOs in Vietnam. And we're also getting reports of creatures running around in Vietnam. But for 10 days out of the month, you're going to report in. They didn't call it Project Blue Book. They called it by another name, but I ended up being a UFO investigator, an agent. So right across the street from this power plant, there was a sea land cargo box, like you see, like when they're getting ready to build something, they put the supplies in it. And that was my office. And some guy was already there. He walked around with a pair of overalls on that said Rockwell International. And he was a radar technician. What he did was he troubleshoot the problems on radar systems. And he was the main radar. He was the main one ahead of Project Blue Book in Vietnam. I'm the second guy there. So I ended up spending 10 days out of the month running around Vietnam looking for like Bigfoot. And then we had other types of creatures, giant birds, stuff like that. I also investigated the Hobart haunting of the Green Lantern aboard a New Zealand ship. I did that. And that's when I, had the encounter with the Predator, the movie, when they made the movie The Predator. You see Arnold Schwarzenegger being beat up, but he sounds like a little boy, when he's being beaten. Well, that's a Predator, how he was beating my ass up, excuse me, I didn't mean to say that word. But I did that for a while, but I would spend 10 days in daylight, and then I go back over to the Royal Palace in Laos, and then from there I go to Lima 85, and just make a circle all the way around throughout the entire war, James. But anyway, I want to get back on Kissinger here. So I go back, I do this for a while, and I end up back in daylight, And I went over to the nuclear power plant one day because, the scientists, they get fed a lot better than regular soldiers. And so I go over to the nuclear power plant and eat with the scientists because they had physicists over there. That's only fitting if you're going to have a UFO investigator. You need to have scientists, that you eat with and talk things over with. But one day we heard some movement outside the gate. Now, when this nuclear power plant was there was nothing but jungle around this nuclear power plant. They had not built the city of Daylat yet. Okay, so they only had like about 4 streets that they had built next to this nuclear power plant. But on the backside of that nuclear power plant, it's nothing but jungle. So went back on the backside of it. You can see with the bulldozers how they big old piles of rubble. You couldn't see over the piles of rubble, dead trees, I mean. But you could hear some movement behind it. So one of the soldiers shot a mortar off, and then we heard no more movement. So they said, well, my intelligence officer I was with said, well, we'll go look. Y'all stay here. We go look. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. Because I didn't have my, when you go in a nuclear power plant, you got to disarm. You can't keep your pistol on you, So we went out of the gate and went back around the backside. You couldn't see over this big pile of brush. And there's Phil Snyder. He was a civilian contractor. My friend Phil Snyder, he was knocked out. And he had a little hole in his chest. I guess shrapnel had hit his chest. It was him trying to come in nuclear power plant, but he was coming in the back way. And as I was leaning down over him, I was, putting my hand over his chest to stop the bleeding. I looked up, and here comes the North Vietnamese back over. And the guy had a rag he had just got through cleaning his rifle with that oil in it. And he took his finger and he pushed it down into Phil Snyder's chest with that little bit of oil rag. And that stopped the blood from Phil Snyder coming out of his chest. And next thing I know, a second soldier came up and he reared back with his rifle and he hit me right above my forehead. He knocked me out. So I got hit in the head with a rifle butt and I'm knocked out. The next thing I remember, I come to, I have a splitting headache. My eyes completely swelled up, is closed. And I'm in a little bamboo cage. And I have a soldier in the front of me and behind me is carrying me in a bamboo cage. And I'm in Cambodia. So I was knocked out from the time I was in Daylat. They carried me all the way over, had crossed over the river, I'm in Cambodia when I woke up. And for about 4 or 5 days, I'm just real dizzy. I have a migraine headache, but they carried me deep into the jungle. And we walk up, they ended up killing some cannibals when I was there. I actually went through a village. Of course, by then I was walking with my hands tied behind me and a rope around my neck. They were leading me. But we actually went upon a village where was cannibals in there. They shot and killed the cannibals. that was the first time I ever witnessed cannibalism. So ended up got in the capital of Cambodia, and they put me in jail, and so they had my trial about a day or two later, and they said, my interpreter said, well, you're being arrested for being in a dope field. And so I ended up getting 30 years hard labor. And the guy that was with me, he came a separate route, but he was there as well. He got 40 years of hard labor. Now I'm 11 years old in 1967, and I've been given 30 years of hard labor. That was the lowest point of my life. So what happened was they couldn't put me in a regular prison because the prisons were segregated. So they put me on a train, and when I got on this train, I was in a cattle car, and I had a leg iron on, and leg iron went to the middle of the floor where a metal eye hook was bolted to the floor. So I was chained in a cattle car, and I was shipped north, and ended up I went for maybe about a day and a half, 2 days ride of running day and night, on this train. But they stopped the train in the middle of nowhere, and they took me off the train, and they led me into the jungle. And when I got into an internment camp, it was filled with French soldiers. And what had happened was, when France left out of Vietnam in 1954, they left some of their soldiers behind. These soldiers were captured in battle. This is 13 years after the French have left. Their French Foreign Legion soldiers were in Cambodia. Now, so I don't know if they thought, I'm not sure why I ended up with the French Foreign Legion, but they probably thought, the French Foreign Legion, to join them, you have to be a convict. So they probably thought, that I'm a drug trader. So I ended up being put into a camp with nothing but the French Foreign Legion. I'm 11 years old, for Christ's sake. And I get in there, and there was one guy in there that was by himself, and they said, well, you shouldn't fool with him because he catch rats and he eats rats, I'm 11 years old. And so I get in there, and these guys are eating soup. And this goes on for a while. And then one day I look at the soup, and I'm, squeezing the meat. Something's not right about the soup. And they all get quiet, and they're looking at me, But the next day, I go back out into the yard, and there's a white shack, it keeps the door closed at all times. And that day, that back door was open, and I looked in there, and there was they were cooking the food in there. And what it was, there was a torso and legs in there. They were taking the bodies of who died or who got killed, and they were cooking the food. So I went in shock. I couldn't. At that point, my life is shattered. I stopped eating, and this for about 7 or 8 days, I didn't eat anything. I collapsed, and they were what they did. They took a funnel and they was pouring the soup down my throat. And when I did get strong enough, the guy that was eating the rats, me and him became friends, and I didn't hesitate to eat rats after that. And his name was Max, and he is from France, and he showed me a picture of his girlfriend, and he said, if you get back to Paris, I want you to tell my girlfriend that I loved her and that I miss her, and promise me you'll come back for me one day, Jimmy, and I want you to find my grave, and I want you to bring my remains back to France. See, France had turned their back on him. So I'm still weak, you know. So what happened was they had to transfer me north because I'm still kind of sick. And so I left Max in the jungle, and I traveled a few more days in the train, chained up. And when I got to my next destination, they blindfolded me and took me off the train and put me into a warehouse. And this was an industrial warehouse. I didn't know where I was at. And when I got in there, there was a cage in the middle of this factory that was empty, and they locked me in there. And then they ended up, I stayed there overnight, and the next morning they took me to the hospital. I stayed in the hospital for about 5, 6, 7 days or so, and they were feeding me chicken soup. And I regained my strength back, but I ended up having to go back to the warehouse. And by that time, you know, I'm starting to stabilize. And this little man come in, little oriental man comes in. He introduced himself. His name's Ho. And me and him get to talking, and come to find out, you know, he says, well, do you know why you're here, Jimmy? And I said, no, but I'm sure I'll know. They'll tell me what charge. They'll let me know my charges in a day or so. I'm sure of it. So a couple of days pass, and he's bringing me these little pastries, you know. And of course, you know, I needed the sugar. I was eating them, you know, first time I had any type of sugar. One day the door opens up. Here comes in the North Vietnamese. I said, oh, hell, I'm in North Vietnam. I said, damn, I knew. And these were colonels. It was Colonel Bu Tien. He's a propaganda minister, you know. And he says, do you know why you're here, Jimmy? And I said, no. He says, you were still on our drugs. In other words, I'm ripping off the North Vietnamese their opium. That they're really pissed off about that. I'm 11 years old, and I wandered into their opium field, and I'm ripping off the North Vietnamese army. And he looks over at me and says, do you know who that man is that's waiting on you every day? And I said, that's Ho. He said, no, it's not. That's the president of the Republic of North Vietnam. That man was President Ho Chi Minh. And come to find out, see, Ho Chi Minh back in the 30s had been to New York City. He worked at a pastry shop. He had been riding the transit system, so he knew everything about America. That's how he talks, but he talked good English, you know. So hell, you know, I done screwed up now. I'm in North Vietnam, got the propaganda minister of North Vietnam on my ass. And then I got the president of North Vietnam, and I'm eating his pastries, So ended up, we're going to turn you over to the prison now. So hell, I had to go to Hanoi Hilton. That's where they lock all the prisoners up. So I get in there, and they put me in a cell. And there's two guys in there. There's one called Rabbit and one called Squirrel. And Squirrel will come in and tell you things. And then if you say anything, Rabbit goes and tells on you. There's basically two prison guards. They said, Jimmy, you're going to get to see the blue room. But what the hell's the blue room? I don't know what the blue room is, So you'll be our guest at the blue room. We got it reserved just for you. So when I was there, there's a light bulb right outside my cell. And there's other prisoners in there, but I can't see them. I can hear them, but you're not allowed to talk. And so what happens is when they bring you to the blue room, there's one window in that room. And there's a chair in there. They strap you to the chair. And then they hook up wires to you. And they crank up a generator and they electrocute you. So, and when I was being electrocuted, the only thing you can do is look at that window, and you're being electrocuted, and you scream, and the light bulb that is in the hallway dims every time they charge up when they start to electrocute you. The light bulb would get dim. So I was tortured, electrocuted, and you're going to give out information. No matter how strong you are, it breaks you. So you give out information, but you also give out disinformation. You keep them confused. So when this torture goes on for a while. I end up going back to my cell, and I can hear him talking to a new guy they just brought in, and they pulled a gun out and they killed him. They shoot him in his cell like a dog. They killed one of the prisoners in the cell next to me, and I'm seeing blood come out onto the floor from the cell. I can't see around the wall, but they've just killed one of the airmen, one of the soldiers. And but what happens is John McCain, Senator John McCain, his father is a rear admiral on the USS Forester, and John McCain is a pilot. John McCain got shot down over Hanoi in 1967, October of 1967. And when he is shot down, they bring him to the Hanoi prison, and his foot is broke. And the minute they find out who he is, they jump on and beat the living hell out of him. So I saw John McCain get jumped on by 4 Vietnamese. They beat him up real bad. And but they broke off from electrocuting me, because they have John McCain now. And so John McCain, he starts giving out information. Now, there are some guys from that prison, when they told Congress that John McCain collaborated with the enemy, that's true. John McCain sang like a canary to them. But what happened was they got to bombing, and they got real close to the POWs. And President Ho came to my cell and said, Jimmy, I need your help. And he had a worried look on his face. And at that point, I mean, I'm being electrocuted. I got to do something. And he says, I'm going to bring you to the palace. So he ends up bringing me to the palace. And when I get there, there's a Chinese intelligence officer. They evict the Chinese intelligence officer from the apartment in the rear of the palace, and they give that apartment to me. And they put the Chinese intelligence officer out in the rain. He is pissed off. And what had happened is,
so this was the president that you got to meet?
yes,
What you meant? Okay.
yes. So what happened? They had, so you have President Ho and the palace guards. They're very conservative. Then you have the Communist Party, who is very communist. They're hardline communists. The army is hardcore communist, but the presidential palace and the guards in there. See, all the presidential guards have been to college. Okay, all of them been to college. They're very well educated, but the army is not. The army has an intelligence level of about a sixth grader. Okay, if you're in the North Vietnamese Army, you basically have about a sixth grade education if you're an officer. Okay, so
Jimmy, was this the palace that you were at?
It kind of looks like I was in the back of. I didn't get to go to the front of it.
Okay,
James. But what happens is there's some Scud missiles in North Vietnam. They have nuclear tips on them. There's 550,000 American soldiers in South Vietnam. And President Ho says, look, if these missiles go into South Vietnam, we'll never be able to eat the rice again. I need your help, Jimmy. At this point, I'm looking at the potential of a nuclear war being started. Okay. I have 550,000 American soldiers in South Vietnam. They're getting ready to be attacked with nuclear weapons. Now, he says, I need you to get with this Chinese intelligence officer. He said, I need for you to figure him out. And so the Chinese intelligence officer comes in. He was the one that was torturing me. And I come to find out he is a warlock. He's a Chinese warlock. And he wants a nuclear war. Now, President Ho does not. He doesn't want this Chinese warlock in Hanoi. So
if Vietnam got contaminated by radiation, the Chinese should just come in and take everything over.
No, the Chinese is getting ready to ruin South Vietnam. The North Vietnamese needs the rice fields. They need the rice fields to feed their population, James.
All right.
The Chinese is there only because of the North Vietnamese army, not because of the palace. Not the president did not invite them in. The North Vietnamese communist, the lawmakers brought him in. You have to remember, Ho's been to America. He knows how Americans are. That's why he opened up to me. All right. He doesn't want. He knows if he knows if weapons are shot in South Vietnam, United States will shoot weapons into North Vietnam. He's a dead man anyway. So I get with this Chinese warlock, and he tells me, he says, you know what we're going to do? We have an army of 199 million fighting men, but we also have 1 million men that are gay. So what happens is that they were going to invade the west coast of the United States, and every soldier that's in the United States military, those 199 million Chinese are going to hold rifles over them. Why? And those 1 million gay Chinese men are going to rape every uniformed soldier in the United States. They were all going to be raped. Even the Joint Chiefs of Staff were going to be raped.
So what? So the warlock told you this?
Yes.
Now this was back in the 60s.
67.
So
and they had nuclear weapons.
So was he like a precognitive, like he could see down the timelines that I guess he wanted to manifest?
James, I actually seen this guy shapeshift into a crow. He was a hybrid human.
All right. Okay. Hey, so now, great. Thank you for mentioning that. So Jessica, now this is where we need your expertise. The warlock shapeshifted into a crow. Do you have any questions for Jimmy?
Oh my gosh, I have a million questions actually right now, but yeah, I mean, I'm just sitting here thinking, you know, I have a son who's is the same age now as you were back then, and I cannot imagine my son going through the things that you went through back then, and it just blows my mind. Like it's wild, and I'm sorry you had to go through all that stuff, but wow. I don't know. I mean, like I said, I have a million questions going through my head right now. But you know, Jimmy, when you were in these programs, were you okay? So like I talk a lot about on my shows and stuff. We talk a lot about like the time travel aspect of everything and the super soldier programs. And were you traveling back and forth like normal humans would, like on air? I know this is kind of a silly question. It's a silly question, but were you traveling like through jump rooms and things like that to get over there? Or were you like on doing like normal travel like the rest of, normal people?
Normal travel.
Okay. I was just curious. I've been talking about this stuff so much lately that I just had to ask.
Yeah, just normal travel. Okay.
Okay.
So
cool.
What happens is he brings me out just outside of, not far from the palace. You know, they had the guns are all covered up with camouflage. And they take a rifle and they pull it on me and they say, get on this anti-aircraft gun. And then they put a North Vietnamese helmet on me and took a picture of me. Just like Jane Fonda, if you've seen pictures of Jane Fonda sitting in the anti-aircraft gun, well, they stuck a gun to me, and I felt bad about that, because I didn't want to do that. But at the time, they done killed one of the airmen, one of the prisoners next to me, one of the POWs. They killed him. And plus all these nuclear weapons. Yeah, just like that. But they would do stuff like put me in front of a firing squad and I'll stand next to the wall and they all pull the triggers and won't be any bullets in their rifles, They won't even give me the decency of a blindfold.
So Jimmy, are there pictures of you out on the internet when you were
no, but there is a Hanoi because they have a file on me. But
so I take you haven't been back to Vietnam after all this. Never went back.
well, not to North Vietnam.
Okay.
I did get back out and didn't go other parts of Vietnam, but let me finish my story, James. 'Cause I'm going to get off too far off. So when I get out in the jungle with this warlock, he takes his shirt off and he sacrifices a chicken and he smears the blood all over his body and he drinks the blood of the chicken, and he's got a pentagram with candles in it, and he's trying to channel a spirit, and he ends up channeling a dead warrior spirit. But what happens is, I get back with President Ho, and John McCain's plane has been found. See, when John McCain ejected, his plane flew on for another 7 or 8 miles till it ran out of fuel, and it just went down to a paddy field. So they went out there. Me and the Presidential Guard went out there, and we took John McCain's radio out of his aircraft, and it's still tuned in to the frequency of the aircraft carrier. All right, we get the radio back to the palace, and the Presidential Guard has gone out on the roof, put an antenna up. We lack one piece to hook the radio up to the antenna. We don't have it. One little piece. And the Chinese won't give us the piece. They're really pissed off about it. So what happens is, four lawmakers in the North Vietnamese party are aligned with the Chinese, and they want to shoot the weapons. So they have called for the arrest of President Ho. Now, President Ho's pretty old at this time. He's 2 years. He'll be dead within 2 years of this event. So President Ho gets word they're going to arrest him. And he tells me, he says, look, don't worry, Jimmy. I've got to go, but I'm going to come back. He flees out of the back of the presidential palace into the jungle and disappears. And the army shows up, but they can't arrest President Ho, but they're going to go ahead and arrest me. And what happens is the presidential guards, they pull guns out. You have the presidential guards pulling guns onto the North Vietnamese army. So you have the army pointing the guns towards the presidential guards, and the presidential guards pointing their guns at the army. And the presidential guard says, no, you're not going to get Jimmy. And I'm standing in the guard when this is all going on. And, they really want to hang me. But and what had happened was they had just hung the other guy, that my intelligence officer, they had hung him just prior. They broke him. He's been hung, and they're coming for me. And what had happened was, during Operation Commando Lobby, that's when we seeded the clouds to make it rain. Make mud, not war, try to bog them down. Well, we see it the clouds prior to everything occurring before I was captured. And it rained and rained and rained. And then the Steel River and Tiger River overflowed, and 40,000 people drowned. I was the one that shot the flare into the sky from the back of an aircraft. So a lot of their friends drowned because of me firing this flare. That's why they came back. They want to hang me. But what happens is it's a standoff, and they don't get me. Okay. So the Army leaves, and I'm at the palace. And about 4 or 5 days later, I hear like thunder with low rumbling noise. And what it is, it kept getting louder and louder in the background. What it was 350,000 North Vietnam troops marching, goose stepping into Hanoi. And President Ho is in front of them. Okay. President Ho walks in with 350,000 fully armed North Vietnamese army. He had been hiding the army out in the jungle. And they arrest 4 of the members of the Congress there. There's 4 congressmen that he did not like. They arrest those 4 congressmen. And look, and 2 days behind that 350,000 men that come marched in, there's another 750,000 more coming in behind them. So you have 2 armies. You have the first one was 350,000, and then the second one was like a 750,000. These were just 2 of the armies who were nearby.
So to answer this question, that's why the Presidential Guards didn't follow the president?
Because the president ordered them to secure the palace and to secure me.
Okay.
Okay. So when they get back in, they arrest the 4 troublemakers. Now, getting back to this Chinese warlock. Okay, he's still running around. So President Ho said, look, we got warlock running around here. We got problems. Can you do an exorcism here? I say, sure. So I go ahead, I channel an ancient Paiute spirit and cleanse the presidential palace of these bad spirits, and was able to drive out these entities, these spirits. And so they were very impressed with this, because they didn't, I'm a spirit guide. I can do these things. And so I was able to rid the Hanoi Palace of these spirits, these evil beings. And so the Presidential Guard says, look, Jimmy, we need you now to make contact. We couldn't, you couldn't make contact through the radio to stop the bombings. We need you to make contact, and we need the bombings to stop. And the bombings were getting close. They were getting close to where the POWs were at. So what they did, they ran a phone line from the back of the palace to the Swedish embassy, and they put the phone in the back of the palace there, and they had a tape recorder going on, and they had the Presidential Guards in there. And I picked the phone up. I'm thinking, who in the hell am I going to call? I mean, I'm just 11 years old, so I'm going to call back to Area 51, because, hey, there's no sense in it. My cover's blown. They know who I am. They know who I am. So I call back down to Area 51, back down to Nellis, and I get a hold of Rachel, one of the Tall White Warriors. Well, the Tall White Warriors has a contract where they cannot interfere. But because of the issue with the nuclear weapons, they make an exception. They said, Jimmy, hold tight. we're going to get somebody to we're going to start getting the apparatus in motion to get you out of there, because you know the tall whites, they go to the embassies. They have a lot of contacts. So I hang up. Of course, I don't believe I told the presidential guard that was an extraterrestrial I was talking to, but they think it was just a regular human I was talking to.
So Rachel sounded like a normal human.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. So I didn't tell her. I mean, that's one thing. I'm very well, I wouldn't say protective. I'm very conscious of the tall white warriors. So I wasn't going to, let them know that they're helping me, because they have a contract where they're not supposed to. But they did send over a flying saucer and do a little show above the palace. But that impressed the palace there, because they called me Spaceman, I guess, because they thought I was extraterrestrial. But anyhow, I hang the phone up, and I went back, to my apartment back there. And a day or two later, they wouldn't make another phone call. And I'm thinking to myself, what am I going to do now? And I could not think of anybody's phone number but Sue Ford. Now, Sue Ford, I've been knowing her since she was 14, well, around 14. I might have known her when she was 12 years old, but when she was 14, she went to work for Henry Kissinger. Okay? She's Henry Kissinger's secretary. Well, me and Sue, we would talk on the phone, when I was back in the States. And she said, Jimmy, I'm going, the last conversation I had with Sue, she says, look, I'm going to go to the State Department. I'm going to take an interview. I'm trying to get a job with the State Department. I said, okay. So that was the last conversation I had with her. And that was the only phone number I could think of. So I thought, okay, I don't have a phone book in front of me, but I knew Sue Ford's number. So I called Sue Ford up. And I said, Sue, this is Jimmy. Of course, when I say Jimmy, she knows that's not my real name. And so she plays along the act. I said, Sue, I'm in Hanoi. Well, that's where you at. You've been missing now for 4 months. Where you been at? What are you doing in Hanoi? I said, well, I got captured, And she said, well, I tell you what, I'm going to call up Henry Kissinger and tell him you're there. And I said, sure. And look, tell them that they're bombing and it's getting real close to where the POWs are at. So I hang up, and she immediately dials Henry Kissinger and tells Henry Kissinger, said, look, Jimmy's in Hanoi and they're bombing, and that the bombs are getting close to the POW camps. Jimmy has asked for you to hold the bombing, to stop the bombing. When she did that, Henry Kissinger jumps into the car. He's got a police escort. They drive him all the way to the White House. He runs into the White House and he tells the president, to stop bombing. And Lyndon Johnson stopped. Well, not Lyndon Johnson, but the president, that then president, stopped the bombing. So anyway, we start to make contact. No one from the White House, the State Department, even the Army, nobody's talking to the North Vietnamese but me. I'm the only one talking to them. And so they let Henry Kissinger come to North Viet. Well, they talked to Kissinger on the
Timmy,
phone.
pause for a second. Jessica, do you need to go? Because I know your shows usually run an hour. We're at 2 here. So are you exhausted? You want to stick
No,
around?
I'm good. I'm good. I've got my son walked in here. He's hanging out, so I got it on the mute button. But
Okay.
yes, I'm good. No, I'm in it to win it tonight. Thank
So
you.
this is a lesson of history. Actually, in the American educational system, they don't teach anything about Vietnam. So, Jimmy, this is like really lightning. And by the way, thank you so much for your service. Thank you for saving all those millions of lives.
Well, anyway, it's arranged for me to be exchanged. There's a colonel that's been captured that one of their friends that they want back. So it's arranged for a prisoner swap. And they go to the bridge. They call it the Friendship Bridge, but it's just north of DMC zone. And it links North Vietnam to South Vietnam. And so I'm on one side of the bridge, and the North Vietnamese colonel is on the south side. And we have to walk towards one another. And we meet in the middle of the bridge. And he looks over at me, just glances, and I look at him, and we walk. We didn't speak. We just made eye contact. We didn't stop, but we made facial contact. And he crosses over into North Vietnam, and I cross over into South Vietnam. That's how I got back. And then when I got back, I had to tell the military where the POW camps were at. But what had happened was when John McCain was shot down, his daddy, had the aircraft carrier Forrester, had parked the aircraft carrier off from the coast of North Vietnam, and they were bombing North Vietnam, and General Westmoreland was doing a lot of attacking in South Vietnam, and they had had enough of it, and they were ready to drop the bomb and to end the war. And but once I got back, and I said, "Hey, we got Chinese up there. They've got the bomb." See, nobody knew they had the nuclear weapons, and so it changed the perimeter of the war. They couldn't invade the north, and they couldn't cross over in Cambodia or Laos because those were neutral countries. So that's why the war dragged on that long. And people kept saying, well, why don't you invade North Vietnam? Well, because there were nuclear weapons there. Nobody knew that but me and the military and Henry Kissinger. So, but Henry Kissinger, like I said, now when I registered my name, I didn't put Jimmy Paine, Paine. I just put Jimmy Paine, Pain, because I was in pain. That's my way of protesting. But yeah, they have pictures of me, and I was a prisoner up there. And I did promise Max that one day I would return and hopefully find his grave and bring him home. Now, I want to say something here. I'm going to mention a POW camp where we have over 1,200 Americans missing in action, never came home from the war. But 12 years after the war, one of the Haman tribesmen, that's one of the tribesmen I worked with up in Laos. He said that Sam Neill, Samneua, is the name of the town, Sam Newan, that there were still POWs in Laos 13 years after the war was over. So I never could say this because Kissinger was alive, but we still have, I do not expect those soldiers to be alive. But there's a POW camp that we need to go to in Laos and dig up the remains. And that's what I'm trying to say tonight.
Wow, thank you, Jimmy. Because what is the official policy? Does anybody know on the missing soldiers? Did they deny it exists?
There has been rumors of it, James, throughout the years. When Kissinger died, now's the time that you can probably request a Freedom of Information Act, and there's no reason to block out any more of this information. President Ho's dead. John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson is dead. Richard Nixon is dead. John McCain's dead. There's no reason why not. We can't get that declassified. And you have to remember the families of 1,200 servicemen, they need closure. And that's the reason I'm talking tonight. I want to bring closure to those people. And I want to say that I'm not mad at North Vietnamese. They did have a problem with the Chinese in their country. Now, one of the little things I found out, this is after the war, before the Chinese came into North Vietnam, President Ho wrote a letter to the State Department when Eisenhower was president. And President Ho told him, he said, look, we got Chinese that are influencing the Congress, and we really need your help. Well, what happened was when President Eisenhower was in office, nobody at the State Department could read Vietnamese. So President Ho's letter was not translated. And in 1959, John F. Kennedy sent troops, advisors into Southeast Asia. So it's a real tragedy that had Ho's letter been translated, we may not have never been in Vietnam. President Eisenhower was concerned about the communists taking over Southeast Asia.
So, Jimmy, that sounds like another one of those Mandela's, or not Mandela, butterfly effect that you need to go back to Montauk and go back in time and put that thing on his desk. But, another parallel reality, I guess.
James, we can what if all night. It's like when I say Lima 85, people don't relate to that. And when I went and when they made the movie Apocalypse Now with Marlon Brando in it, I try to tell Marlon, because I would stay over in Tahiti and we would talk for hours on end before he took the role of playing Colonel Kurtz. I knew the real Colonel Kurtz, and he cut heads off, but that was to keep the cannibals away. You know what I mean? There were cannibals out there, and
wait, out where?
In Laos. I know where the temple's at and everything, and the Haman tribesmen. A lot of people think they're savages, but I've been with them. In fact, that's how I kept mud on my body all the time because of the insects. I learned a lot from the Haman tribesmen. I actually discovered a flower that can cure cancer. we had a Laotian officer, military officer, who was handling depleted uranium shells, and he had cancer and big lumps on the side of his neck, and he was very near death. And we took this flower that we had found, the Haman tribesmen found. I went in the jungle with them, and we made a tea and kept feeding this guy that had the cancer, and cancer went away. I've never seen anything like that. But that's part of being a courier. I was going to put that in the diplomatic mail bag, but when I was at Lima 85 atop that radar base, it was attacked in 1968, and the bag was left in the room, and we ended up having to have the base bombed, and there was nothing left on top of the mountain. So the flower was lost. But the good news is I know where the park is. It's been made into a refuge park, and there's other flowers out there. So, maybe somebody from the State Department say, hey, you might need to check in on this story. And by the way, we may need to go back to Lima 85 and get that flower that Jimmy's talking about.
Jimmy, can I come with you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I have a degree in horticulture.
Well, I'm not so sure these big farmer would like you. They're making a lot of money off cancer, James. I'd be more scared of them than I would the Viet Cong right now.
All right. Okay, great. So let's just so that's basically your interaction with Kissinger, essentially.
Well,
or is there more?
We could go into another section about the Middle East, but time is not going to allow it tonight.
Let's say that for another.
That's another night.
Okay.
But yeah, I can explain the Middle East to you very well, and how the Middle East is still affecting you today. In fact, in 11 days from now, the dollar is going to be decoupled, and so you're going to see inflation starting to hit come the first of the month.
Because we've discussed this, so like maybe there was a future timeline where you saw the dollar was decoupled, and basically because most of our products in the United States are imported, so suddenly you're not going to be able to buy tires for your car because rubber doesn't,
Well, as I said, we'll have to save that for another night. But I can explain every bit of the Middle Eastern policy to you in a real simple way, and explain how that affects you today. That's another very sensitive information, because I would go into archives and do research for Henry. See, I had before Sue Ford came along, he used me. Now, Sue Ford was his secretary, and of course, you read her book. She talks about Kissinger, but like I said, I don't fool with politicians. But I know Henry. I'm all Area 51, so I don't want to do no State Department work for you.
Let's go through some comments real quick and try to get through quick here. Mike says, I hope this is a wake-up call as politicians seem to be so surprised by UFO intel that this info is available. Should you tell them that those in charge, they're basically lazy? So there's lots of disclosure. I mean, we got Jessica Jones and her Cryptid Huntress channel, Arkeem Raw and the Disclosure Now. Of course, Michael Sala is doing amazing work. Penny Bradley. I mean, we can go on, and not to mention my own channel. So yeah, there's lots of intel, but it's like they just ignore us. So what we're gonna do, Jimmy, is we're gonna just put the info out there, and maybe they'll catch up.
Well, there's definitely a lot of UFO activity in Vietnam. I've investigated Bigfoot. I've gigantic birds, prehistoric deer, ghost. I've done it all in Vietnam, but as I said, a lot of it was classified. My main focus was on the POWs, and that was my main focus. And the UFO stuff is kind of back burner. But yeah, I'm one of the only 2 guys in Vietnam that did the paranormal research.
Maybe Jessica or either you, Jimmy, might be able to answer this. The dogmen, were they sending dogmen into the foxholes?
Yeah, I was going to ask Jimmy about that tonight. So thank you for asking that.
No,
Absolutely.
there is no dogmen in Vietnam. I've investigated it. There were when a child is retarded or deformed, they're rejected from their village. And when you hear a dog men, these are basically just humans that have gone deep into the jungle. They're the deformity, and they're a social outcast.
Interesting.
Oh, how about you, Jessica? Do you think there's dogmen in the Vietnam jungles?
Well, I hear stories about it pretty often. So, there's stories of the dogmen, actually not dogmen, they're actually werewolves that were sent into the tunnel systems underneath the ground. And there's a story about 2 werewolves being let loose and sent down there, and they had a body count of like 350 people or something like that. But it's just a story. I wasn't there, so I don't know.
Well, most of those are just GI stories. Now, I have seen werewolves, real werewolves. In fact, when I was at Area 51, there's werewolves out by Pentwater Cave. And if you go out on the western side of Area 51, there's a place out there, there's a national park just on the side of the west side of Area 51, where they meet up. I have the name of the park. I don't have it in front of me, but I can get with you sometime later and give you the area of where these werewolves are at. There's also werewolves up in Alaska. I've been up there. I think there's one now living in Kentucky. I would advise you go look up Annie Harper. She writes steamy romance novels, paranormal novels. How to Seduce a Werewolf. That's based on a true story.
How to seduce a werewolf.
I know the werewolf personally.
Wow.
Are they aggressive? Are they loyal?
They can be aggressive if they're young. They can they shapeshift. They're basically a hybrid human, is what they are.
Jimmy, I have a question for you. I've been told that there is a dogman / werewolf and Sasquatch breeding program within, I'm not going to say the U.S. government per se, but it could be just some sort of agency. Since the 1950s has had a breeding program. Do you know anything about that?
Well, yes and no. They do take them and bring them to Area 51, and if they can integrate into society, they'll let them back out. The ones that can integrate in society, they're brought in an intelligence capacity. The ones that can't, they don't leave Area 51. They keep them on the base. The ones that can integrate, they have to go back and forth. They go in and out of Area 51. But yeah, they can, a true werewolf, if he left from, say, your home, he could make it to Alaska in maybe a week running.
Wow.
If there was nothing in his way. of course, there's roads and bridges and stuff like people. But I mean,
Humans.
if there was just nobody between you and Alaska, he can make it in about a week. About a week.
Wow.
So Jessica is our Southern Belle here in Georgia. So you're saying from Georgia to Alaska in 1 week, pretty much?
Yeah, they a full. I mean, a real full-grown werewolf. He can make it. They have incredible senses. They're powerful.
All right. Well,
And
yeah.
Well, that's like I said. There are werewolves, and they are tied in with Area 51.
Okay.
They're
I want to share something. I think this might be a 2-hour or 3-hour show, but I'll get to this real quick. So, okay. So what you're seeing is a sketch that I recreated of a mission that I did as the cat guy there. So basically, I'm a child. It looks like I'm in Area 51. So they're training us. They show us these videos on the screen. They show us the telekinesis. Say, see, this person is doing telekinesis. You can do it too. And then they have another video where they may show someone levitating. And then they say, so each time they're trying to teach us how to do this. And the last step was the shape-shifting aspect. So you literally have to think about every little fiber or hair on your body and the size that you want. So each one of the children were given a choice of what type of creature they wanted to shapeshift into, and one of the children chose a turtle. So that person was kicked out of the program because a turtle is not a really good super soldier. So I chose the cat, and the dog man back there. It doesn't really have fur; it's more like skin, like a blue color skin. This was David Lotherington in the background. So they found a ET that should not have been on this planet, and they dropped us off in Myanmar. So essentially, I see myself as like this 13 or 14-year-old kid, and I'm on this helicopter. They drop us off, and we shapeshift, and we take care of the really bad ET that should not be there. One of us grabbed the head, another person grabbed the leg, and they didn't even see us coming. So yeah. Anyway, I just thought I'd share that.
Well, first of all, I've been scratched by a werewolf. So what happens is you'll run a fever, and it's extraterrestrial, but I would see these different wolves at Area 51, and basically it's extraterrestrial, the fever. You hear about UFOs and Bigfoots. Well, basically, it's a breeding program. It's extraterrestrial in nature.
Right.
So it's.
Yeah, Jimmy, let's say, oh my gosh, there's so much question. We got to go through this quickly here. Okay, thank you so much. Let's move on from the dog stuff. So Jerry's claiming he created Predator. He's also claiming that something connection to Star Trek. So just to confirm, Jimmy, that Predator story was based on you.
Yes, the man the director of the movie lives about 35 miles from my house. And what happened was Howard Hunt. Now, Howard Hunt is one of the 4 tramps that went through Dealey Plaza when John F. Kennedy was shot. He's also the same one who got caught in the Watergate building, the break-in during the Watergate build. He is original CIA director. He lives about 4 or 5 miles from my home. And then the movie director lives about 35 miles from my home. And Howard told the movie director is the one that made the movie about the predator. It shows it happening in South America, but really it happened in Cambodia is where it happened at.
Okay, thank you. And were you the one who said that they like these underground bases had Howard Hunt's, was it Howard Hunt or another one, imprint on all to enter all the facilities? You had to have the DNA, the biometrics. So so they had to clone them out. Basically, they found it was easier to clone them than change it all.
Well, how I would get into the bases, I would enter certain codes. Now, some of them are biometric. Is depending on what facility you go to.
Oh, you know what? It was Howard Hughes. That's who it was. So you didn't say that, Jimmy. It must have been somebody else. Okay.
I didn't. Right. I'm just telling you how I go into these bases. There are some bases, like I said, I know where one's at now, but if you went in it and you could be met by an extraterrestrial, and that one's in LA. So I know how to get into the underground base at LA, but I would never go in there without permission. Men in Black, you don't do anything alone. You do it with another M.I.B. because it keeps the confusion down.
Nice, thank you. All right. Oh my gosh. So we got 24. I don't know if we're gonna have time to go through all this. So let's see. What's just here? Do you know about the Dyson goggles? I know Jessica just did a show about the featured in They Live movie. You know
yeah, the sunshades. Yeah, I used to have a pair of them, and they are real. They'll make you have a migraine. And I have seen the creatures. I'm very aware of that, and it's a very true story. Very
Jessica,
true.
You have any questions? I know it's really late, but maybe
energy. No, I did a show on those. That's one of the highest view shows I've ever had on my entire channel. Was about the dicyan and dye goggles. And for people who are watching who aren't familiar with those, it's a type of dye that I guess they put them in some goggles. They were using them as an experiment, and they gave them to a bunch of Vietnam soldiers and some gunners on the back of some helicopters, and they were shooting at each other because they were seeing demons flying through the air. So they're actually interdimensional viewing technology. Okay.
When I was on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, every sniper has a lookout. And when I was at Area 51, I'm the spotter. I was Lee Harvey Oswald's spotter. He would get his rifle and put up on some sandbags, and I would take a pair of binoculars and look down yardage from it. And when he would shoot his rifle, I say, well, you need to go a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, to get the target. Now, when I was at the Texas School Book Depository on the 6th floor, I looked through Lee's scope. I didn't fire it. I just looked through the scope. And the interesting thing was that just like the goggles that the sunglasses that was wore in the movie They Live, I saw the same thing. I saw a creature right beside the motorcade. There was a creature standing on the curve. And then I saw 4 little grays. And it's just as Kennedy was shot, you couldn't see this, but the 4 little grays captured his soul or his orb. See, that's why they call them fallen angels, because when you die, your aurora, your orb, your life force leaves your body, and they get excited and they try to catch this little glowing ball of light. But yeah, Lee Harvey Oswald's scope was just like the pair of sunglasses. Now, what happened was Eisenhower knew where the rifle was at, and he got me to climb through the garage window and hand him the rifle. And then the CIA took the rifle scope off and put another one on there, and it was put back into the garage. So that wasn't exactly the original rifle scope that was on the rifle.
Wow, so many questions. So somebody was asking. So there were 2 shooters that day. Wasn't there like 17?
There was another shooter up there with Lee in the second window, and there was about 17 more spread out at different locations.
Malcolm Wallace.
Some was behind, but some of them was behind a wood fence, and some was behind the grassy knoll. Had some of them all over. It was 17 total, and they were not necessarily all CIA. There were some from the State Department. They had some from all over, all the alphabet agencies. They were from all over.
Okay. So we've already discussed about this. I'm not going to answer.
We've already discussed it.
Yeah, guys, you need to go back and watch more of that. I don't even remember which video. And probably we did one specifically. I think we did about JFK. But just go through the descriptions. You'll find it. Okay. So let's see here, guys. I don't know if we're gonna have time. I'm going to skip all the Antarctica, Mars stuff because it's too much. Christy, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I have a memory of Kissinger on Mars, but I think that was his clone body was Eisenhower. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Well, Kissinger, I have seen him in a flying saucer, Area 51, because I was running some tests on the control panel. While I was at the control panel, I had taken one of the floor panels off, and there's fiber optic cable running to the magnifiers, that lifts the flying saucer up. And he walked in. He didn't say anything to me. He's just walking around looking. And he looked up above the hatch, and there's an emblem that was above the hatch, which says, the aliens don't write, they put symbols up, okay? But the same symbol says hatch or exit. He took that image, and about 2 weeks later, when they made the Trilateral Commission, they had to have a symbol, and he took that symbol, and that's what they used for the Trilateral Commission. So that actual Trilateral Commission symbol came from the hatch on a flying saucer.
So it's the inverted pyramid.
Yeah, that's the symbol above the hatch. So I do know he knows about the aliens because he was in the flying saucer when I was in there running tests on the control panel.
Oh wow! Thank you so much. Can you answer this question quickly? We need to save it for another show. Was Eisenhower tricked by MJ-12?
Eisenhower has been known about it. When my parents first met President Eisenhower, he knew all about it. And in fact, it was Eisenhower who convinced my father that it would be best for me to go into it, because either my father could volunteer me in or they would take me, and then my parents and family would never see me again because it was of national interest. Yeah, Eisenhower was all in on it. He's probably one of the few presidents that knew it all.
And he was also searching for all the Germans from Antarctica that were under, that was the McCarthy era, where they were looking for communists, but it was actually Germans.
The fact is, the war had been over 17 years when I was taken to Area 51. And what it was, some of the German scientists and technicians were dying, and they needed to retrain newer technicians. And I was of German origin. I'm Italian German origin, and my family fought on both sides of the war. And the military did not trust me. And but what happened was I ended up becoming a technician working on the flying saucers, and I was exposed to radiation just like the Germans were, and your government, the way your government greeted me, they took me as a child, they brought me out to the test range, and they detonated a nuclear device that was the Sudan crater, and I was irradiated as a child. So that tells you how much they really liked me, which they didn't. There still was animosity towards not only towards the paperclip scientists, but towards their children and their extended family.
Thank you so much. Certainly, we can. There's so much to discuss about that. Well, let's just say that for another time. D wants to know: was Andrew Basaggio Project Paperclip? Did you work with Project Pegasus?
Yes, he was part of it, and he is telling the truth. Now he's got some PTSD. I knew Andrew. I like Andrew as a friend, but Andrew has. I try to reach out to Andrew. He won't talk to me, and that's a sad thing.
How about? Would you like me to try to arrange a show?
James, I'm not going to do anything if he's not willing to meet me halfway.
Let me try. Let me try. Okay.
But he's got some problems. But he is a nice guy. But he's got some problems, and I think he's starting to realize it now that he's not going to be president. I knew that. What they do, they trick you a lot, and they tricked him. And that is just very sad.
They just wanted him to waste his time.
Well, he did try to tell people, and they laughed at him. And they should not have laughed at him.
I remember, I think it was a Stephen Colbert report. He went on there, and they were making fun of him about time travel, and he was really upset after all that. And I remember posting a comment about how he was so upset. And they deleted the NBC deleted my comment, but by the way, it looks like he's been sent to Gitmo, but I'm gonna let that be.
Well, the thing is, James, all the presidential elections are.
Oh no! Yeah. No! Let's not say that. Okay, yeah. I've had a video deleted. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Let's go on. Let's just
you'll leave that alone.
So Jerry thinks that they killed JFK to escalate the war in Vietnam, and I guess. Jimmy, you've already laid it out that wasn't this case because North Vietnam had a nuclear weapon.
Well, I know this now. When I was in South Vietnam, I think it was Saigon, I walked my intelligence officer, because when you're younger, you have to get with someone a few years older. You're being trained. Lyndon Johnson had a factory over there. Now, what happened was the Kevlar vest that the soldiers wore, the bulletproof Kevlar vest, Lyndon Johnson got the Kevlar, and he was going to go into making fan belts and selling them. So he took Kevlar and they coated it with the rubber, and he had a fan belt making machine. He was going to sell the fan belts to the military through a third offshore company, try to hide his name and everything. And so I actually seen the fan belt machine. He was paying the head man over the factory 80 cents a day, and then he was paying the workers 45 cents a day. Well, guess what? When the monsoon hits, you can't work the rice fields. So they were glad to have 45 cents a day to work in that sweatshop. So Lyndon Johnson profited from the war. A lot of people didn't know that, but I've actually been into the factory that he owned.
So he's basically, wouldn't really call him a traitor. Go far. Maybe he is.
Well, he was profiting off the war, and I tell you somebody else who profited off that war, and that was Eisenhower. He had stock in the Bell Helicopter Company, and right before he gave that speech about not trusting the military industrial complex, well, what happened was the Bell Helicopter Company decided, instead of paying out the dividend, they went ahead and reinvested into other projects. He got mad about it, and but yeah, Eisenhower had stock in Bell Helicopter Company.
Nice. And Bell Helicopter is owned by Textron, and that's
Yeah,
my dad worked for Textron.
Yeah. Now, Walter Dornberger, he was a German rocket scientist. He was my intelligence officer when I was growing up. He's German, and he was over Bell Helicopter Company.
Oh wow! So yeah, we could go down so many roads here, and oh my god, we're almost 3 hours. Oh, I have to make a decision, Jessica. Should we just should we kill? Oh my god, I hate to kill it. So many good questions in here. Maybe I can just go through some comments. So we have Finn Ben Dasley for an Ivan. Yeah, okay. I want to get this video deleted. Thank you for that comment, Sybil. I appreciate it. King James said Jimmy won the war, landed on the moon, and saved the Pope in one day. So thank you for that, King James. Appreciate that. I really hope Jimmy could do an episode about dogmen sometimes. Maybe Jessica and Jimmy. I don't know if you want me to come over there, we can go over to your channel.
I can do a show on Dogman. I think Jessica, I could open her up. I have to open up some papers, but I can show Jessica where to go if she wants to meet a werewolf. Of course, I wouldn't wear any perfume, Jessica.
Okay, I'll remember not to wear perfume, but yeah, I do. We should definitely do a show on werewolves and dogmen for sure.
Yeah,
let's do it.
I can show you on the map where to go if you want to meet one, but I highly recommend you. You may want to go to Area 51 first, because they do wander out of Area 51. I don't know any of the younger werewolves, but yeah, I used to run with them at Area 51.
And Jimmy, wait, should I be concerned? Because you said there's, the one that seduces women, right?
Well, Annie Harper, when she wrote her steamy romance movie book, How to Seduce a Werewolf, I knew the guy that was the werewolf. Yeah, I knew. She didn't know he was a werewolf when she married him. And then she found out because he was coming back peeing on the door on the front porch. He was doing that to mark his territory so he wouldn't, let's keep away the other werewolves, because he was scared that, they were going to steal his girlfriend, so that was why he marked his territory. Of course, she found out and told him not to pee on the porch anymore.
Don't all men do that, though?
Yeah, that's how they mark their territory.
Exactly.
If you have a suitor and he's a werewolf and he's scared he's going to lose you, he'll come back up and pee on your porch or your car or whatever. He's marking his scent to keep the other ones away.
Take note, ladies.
So we need Barry Littleton here for his joke right now. Oh my gosh. So who appoints cryptids to guard stargates? Well, is that even true? Yeah, actually it is true.
Dogmen do guard Area 51. That is a very true question and answer.
Okay, thank you for that. And what about stargates?
that's more towards Paiute, the Paiute warriors, people who go into hell are werewolves looking for the demons. And the female werewolf, she's the guard, she's the Stargate guard. Her duty is not let any demons out of hell. The Paiute warriors, who are werewolves, go into hell. They kill the demon. Does that make any sense to you? I'm not sure.
Well, I'm too tired right now to even think about it, but
Yeah.
I believe you. So let's see here. Big spiders in the war, the Vietnam War. What do
Yeah.
you say? Yes.
Yes.
How big?
Well, maybe about the palm of your hand, but the Cambodians eat them, cook them.
So this is like something that we know about, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That's domain.
There was a lot of snakes in Vietnam. At least 50 snake bites.
Did you ever get bit?
I got bit by a rattlesnake at Area 51. Now, when I was in the jungle of Vietnam, I've had a couple of cobras that go by me, by my foot. Yeah, but I never got bit in Vietnam. I was bit at Area 51 by a rattlesnake.
All right, thank you.
Jimmy, I had a friend who was sent to Vietnam to go fight when he was a young man, and he got attacked by rock apes. Did you ever encounter those?
Let me tell you the story about that. Just east of Khe Sanh, if you go a little bit to the northeast of Khe Sanh, there's a radar station close to the coast of Vietnam there, but it's just below the DMC zone. And there was reports, in fact, one of the first soldiers in Vietnam was killed there. But there was reports about an ape-man. But what it was, I investigated it. And what it was, when you're in the jungle, there's tigers in the jungle. And when you hear any kind of noise, you throw a stone to make the animal go away. And there was a lot of reports from young GIs, particularly when they first got in Vietnam. There were rocks being thrown at them in the jungle. But those are most likely children or villagers throwing stones because they hear something moving in the jungle. They don't know if it's a GI. They don't know if it's a tiger, okay? Now, I have ran across wild men in Vietnam, either a retarded villager that's been cast out or deformed villagers been cast out. There was a lot of reports of ape men. There are no ape men in Vietnam. Now there's a gibbon, which is a small monkey, but there are no ape men in Vietnam. So that is basically just a wartime story.
Thank you.
I have seen Bigfoots, but there are no Bigfoots in Southeast Asia. There's Bigfoots in the United States.
What about a Yeti? There's a Yeti.
I've seen Bigfoots out in I've seen Bigfoots out around the Rockies.
Okay.
In fact, when I went to Area 51, I had just came off. We had just killed a Bigfoot out in Oklahoma. And when I got to Area 51, I put the metal band on my head. And that's when Bigfoot, because I remembered I was, pretty young, and I was able to materialize Bigfoot or Junior at Montauk.
Thank you. So Jessica, the numbers, did you have a chance to do that today?
No, I didn't get a chance to remove you today. I did not. I'll do it tomorrow though, but not tonight.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right, skip that one. So let's see here. We're getting around to here near the end of this. Somebody was commenting: was Kissinger a Rothschild or Rockefeller? Do you know?
I don't know. I know that the only thing paranormal I've seen about Kissinger that I've never been able to figure out, back in the 80s, early 80s, he had to go to Germany for a funeral. And he went back to his hometown of Ford. And he had a message that came in. I never met his family. I've seen his family one time, but I had to go to that church that he was at and give him a message. But anyway, after the funeral was over, I didn't go to the funeral. I was in the background because I wasn't part of that group. But after the everyone had left the cemetery, I seen a orb come and go from the Kissinger's graves. I presume it might have been his father or grandfather. So that's very unusual to see an orb coming up out of a grave, and the little light about the size of a softball move about the cemetery. That's the only thing paranormal that I've saw about him. Now, whether he was I'm kin to the Rothschilds. I'm kin to them, but Kissinger, no, I don't think Kissinger is kin to anybody.
Okay.
He may be used by the Rothschilds, but he's certainly not kin to them that I know of.
All right, let's move on. Okay, this one is kind of all tied together. We can quickly go through this. David Adar, does anybody have David Adar's contact email, please? If you do, could you go to my website, supersoldiertalk.com, and click on the contact? I've been trying to get a hold of him. I went to an event back in May, and I bought a ticket to hear him speak, but there was no schedule. It was like a festival, and I didn't know what time he was going to be there, and I missed him, and then he didn't even show up in the VIP booth area, which I paid for that too. So I've been trying to get a hold of him, but because he lives here in North Carolina, I think maybe he should move. But okay, you'll go ahead. Yes, you have something to say?
Yeah, I know David. I've been around David when he was young, when he was building the rocket. I like David. I never got to work with him a whole lot, but I've been around him. And David is very truthful. Everything he talks about is very real. He's fun to be around.
Okay, thank you.
I was in the rocket program because I worked on the propulsion system. I knew Von Braun. I mean, and I have seen the UFO that he talks about that you put your hand on, the bioelectric one, and yes, he's telling the truth.
Well, I'll tell you what, maybe if we could get him on here and you together, that would be awesome for a future show.
It would be interesting. I don't think he remembers me, but I like him. He's got a good sense of humor, and you need that. You can't really take this stuff too serious. It'll it's not good to. So I'm reading a message here. The Ewok types are cool. Captain Bisbo and his crew love them. Jimmy gave them a peanut butter. Yeah, I gave them. I like Captain Bismo. He smokes a pipe. He was my best friend. He's an Ewok.
So Ewoks are real.
They're very real. In fact, I gave the only real picture that I had, I gave to Misha Johnson, and Misha Johnson put it in her book, and it shows a German walking up beside a German soldier, and the Ewok is holding his hand. That's the only known picture of a real Ewok. Now there's about 7 minutes of one riding a little scooter on Star Wars, and that's what you call soft disclosure. But every one of those other Ewoks are fake. But there is one real extraterrestrial in Star Wars
Wow. I
movie.
think
I love the Ewoks. That
so.
was one of my favorites. The Ewok Adventures. That's one of the best movies from my childhood.
Yeah, they the Mo and Captain Bismo. Well, I mean Mo. Um, I liked them. That's what got me in trouble when I got sent to Area 51 when I had the scratch on my arm because they can carry a disease. They don't know. People don't. Well, I'm not saying they're disease that they have diseases. I mean, they just didn't know at the time. If you're exposed to anything extraterrestrial, you put in isolation. Nobody wants to end up like the American Indian when they first met the white man.
Thank you for that. All right. So, CIA was the CIA involved with the Barney and Betty Hill case?
The men in black were Oscar Snyder, his father. Phil Snyder's father, Oscar Snyder, was the German on board of the spacecraft when Betty and Barney Hill was in there. That's why if you listen to the Hills case, they talk about a German officer. Well, that was Oscar, and Oscar was also tied in with the Philadelphia experiment. He worked on the Camp Hero. He worked on the Eldridge getting equipment ready, and that's how I got in with the Montauk Boys and the time traveling and all that.
Oh wow, yeah. A distant relative of Oscar has contacted me recently and said that I was in the same group of him as super soldiers. We went to the mountains of Black Mountain, North Carolina. I met Heinrich Himmler, so that's the other guy in the picture, because he was the general that ran Paperclip. Him and the other guy was Kruger, Gabriel Kruger. But anyway, I'm going to go into all this right now. So let's go. Okay. So yeah, comment from Oscar Schneider. Jimmy suggests he was good friends of Phil Schneider, which I guess was his son, right?
Yes.
Jimmy suggests the knowledge of distinct history of Kissinger, Lee Oswald, President Lyndon Johnson, and the Tall Whites. Would it be unreasonable to suggest that the Tall Whites are a race of beings like the Elohim, who are manipulating humanity? So do you think the Tall Whites are manipulating humanity?
No, I think the Tall Whites are using the Earth as a stopover, and I know they intertwine with the military. What's the problem with the Tall Whites is that a common code that you would have could kill a tall white. Okay, if you sneeze, they have no immunity. And the same goes for you. If one of them coughs on you or sneezes on you, you don't know what that'll do. So they, the tall whites, I knew from a very early age not to touch them and not to cough on them. And they raised me, they took part in raising me. And when I was young, one of them took off and his craft malfunctioned and he crashed in a ravine and nobody knew he had crashed. And so he was in a ravine for about 4 or 5 days there. He was trapped. And I took a shortcut and walked into the ravine because I wanted to go to a different point beyond that ravine. And I actually walked up on this crashed spacecraft when I was about 8 years old. And I went and I couldn't get them out, but I went and got help for them. And they were able to get some soldiers down there and get them out and load them in an ambulance. But afterwards, the military was talking to the tall whites and said, well, maybe y'all need like sort of like a uh, emergency response, sort of like civil defense, civil air patrol, and the tall whites agreed to it. So the tall whites trained me to fly some of the scout craft, and I was to be used like as a backup, like carrying supplies, or if one of them became injured or whatever, I could go pick them up and put them on the craft and transport them back. So that's how I got my start with the tall whites. They never would give me any weapons because their reflexes are 3 to 4 times faster than a human. But I think of Rachel and Pamela like a den mother, like a little Cub Scout does. And so they raised me the best way they could. And she also got me my first job at the Weyland Corporation. If you watch the movie Alien 1, Captain Dallas, well, that's me. I was in charge of the Stromo. And
we've done a show about that.
We've done a show on that, but I was just, touching the question there.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm ready to call it. I don't know, Jessica, are you ready?
I mean, I could stay here all night, but yeah, I do. I probably do need to get some sleep. I don't know, at some point. What do you think, Jim?
I'm ready to turn in now. Is this going to be shown on your channel, Jessica, or James's channel, or both?
Well, it's on my channel. I'm also going to put it on Rumble, but I mean, if Jessica, if you want to mirror it, I'll be happy to send you a link. You can post it.
Thank you.
Just
yeah.
let me know. And,
okay. Well, I'm thinking if we kind of push a little on both of y'all, that when Jessica does decide to go back in and investigate these the haunting on the Hobart and the Predator, and plus we have, like I said, the prehistoric deer that I discovered, and the flower, cancer curing flower. We can probably go back in.
Jimmy, we need to get that sponsor. Elon Musk never wrote back to my letter, and I wasn't gonna contact him. Yeah.
Well, if they don't, I'm like this, James. Surely sooner or later it's going to come around to everyone, and they don't know if they're missing out. But it's a shame, like I said, because if we really need to get this Germanium transistor.
Let's just
get it going.
But I'll reach out to Emery Smith and see if he can maybe help out with trying to get that flower. But meanwhile, let's call it, everybody. Okay.
Yeah, let's call it.
Okay. If you want to read more about my interaction with the Kissinger, it was more Heinz Humberg. That's the guy that handled his money on Mars. You can get my copy of my book at neologicaltech.com. Or you can go to supersoldiertalk.com and it'll take you over to get a book. You guys get yourself a meditation cube to help you relax. They're on sale. I don't know, something. I think the sale ends like on the 2nd or something. But it'd be great if you can support the work that I do. Go to my nonprofit healingsoulsurvivors.org, and I'd be thrilled if you could make a donation because YouTube has just been pounding my channel. But it's all good. We're gonna keep pushing through, of course. Jessica, why don't you plug yourself in there? Tell us more about where we can contact you.
Well, thank you, James. Actually, I didn't even know this was filming. It was streaming on YouTube because it wasn't on your normal channel. So I just discovered that you're on a different channel right now.
Yeah, that's
new.
So that channel has been they're blocking me posting any links. So literally, that was like 15 years of work. But at least I tell you what. Yeah, Laura Eisenhower lost hers and a few others. So I'm just going to be grateful for what I do have. But
Yes.
thank
Well,
you.
hey, you still got just about as many subscribers as I do, and I've had my channel for a couple of years right now on this channel, on your backup channel. So I can be found at thecryptidhuntress.com. That's my website. All of my social media links are there. I do have a YouTube channel and a Rumble channel. That's the Cryptid Huntress. So you guys come find me. I do live shows there all week, and then I'm a weekend host at Spaced Out Radio. So you guys can find me there too. But yeah, I'm all over the place. And thank you so much for having me here tonight, James and Jimmy. It's always a pleasure. Thank you guys.
It's a winter solstice too. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, Jimmy. I will all see you on the other side. Thank you very much.
Good night. Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Y'all
Bye.
yeah. Please consider supporting Super Soldier Talk by purchasing your own Neo Meditation device. Your Neo Meditation device will help you reduce stress, integrate trauma, enhance intuition, enhance clairvoyance, and enhance creativity. Get yours now at www.neologicaltech.com.